The cold did not just seep into the house, it lived there. It was mid-January in Pennsylvania, the kind of bitter, unforgiving winter that rattled the window panes and turned the breath of the trees into ice. Inside her 4-bedroom colonial home, a home she and her late husband Henry had spent 30 years paying off, 68-year-old Janice sat perfectly still in her worn armchair. The house was submerged in absolute darkness. Janice had turned off every lamp, every hallway sconce, and even unplugged the microwave so the digital clock wouldn't draw extra power. The thermostat on the wall, a small rectangular box that used to dictate the comfort of her family, was turned completely off. It had been off for 3 weeks. Janice pulled the thick, crocheted blanket tighter around her shoulders, her dark brown hands trembling slightly. Her knuckles were swollen with the familiar dull ache of arthritis, made infinitely worse by the freezing air. She wore 2 pairs of wool socks, thermal leggings beneath her thick corduroy pants, and 3 layers of sweaters. Yet the chill seemed to bypass the fabric entirely, settling deep into her bones. She closed her eyes, listening to the rhythmic, hollow ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick-tock, tick-tock. It sounded louder in the dark. It sounded like a countdown. "It's just temporary, Mama," Marcus's voice echoed in her mind. She remembered the way her son had looked sitting across from her at the kitchen table 6 months ago. He had worn a sharp, tailored suit, smelling of expensive cologne, though his eyes darted nervously around the room. "The construction business is just facing a minor liquidity bottleneck. Supply chain issues, you know. Chloe and I are tightening our belts, too. If we just reroute your pension directly into the corporate holding account, it'll show the bank we have strong liquid assets. It'll save the company, Mama. I promise. It's only for a little while." Janice was a retired high school English teacher. For 35 years, she had stood in front of chalkboards and whiteboards, grading essays late into the night, managing unruly teenagers and building a solid, unshakable foundation for her family. She was an educated, intelligent black woman who had survived the loss of her beloved husband and raised 2 children on her own. She knew what a liquidity bottleneck meant. It meant her son was drowning. And what does a mother do when her child is drowning? She reaches into the water, even if it pulls her under. She had signed the power of attorney. She had let Marcus and his wife, Chloe, take over the administrative burden of her finances. After all, her pension from the school district, combined with Henry's life insurance annuity, brought in exactly $10,000 every single month. $10,000. It was more than enough for a widow living alone. But as Janice sat shivering in the dark, her stomach let out a low, painful grumble. The hunger was a sharp, twisting sensation, entirely different from the cold. Earlier that afternoon, Chloe had stopped by. Her daughter-in-law hadn't taken off her designer sunglasses or her plush cream-colored cashmere coat. Chloe had stood in the foyer, complaining about how hard things were, how stressed Marcus was, and how they had to cancel their winter trip to Aspen. Then Chloe had reached into her Prada handbag, pulled out a thin white paper envelope, and handed it to Janice with a tight, sympathetic smile. "Here's your allowance for the week, Janice. I know it's tight, but we're all making sacrifices, right?" When Chloe's luxury SUV pulled out of the driveway, Janice had opened the envelope. Inside was a single, crisp $50 bill. $50. For a week of groceries, gas, and medicine. Out of a $10,000 pension. Janice rubbed her stomach, trying to ignore the gnawing emptiness. She had skipped lunch. For dinner, she had eaten half a sleeve of stale saltine crackers and drank a cup of hot water with a squeeze of lemon. She told herself it was fine. She was strong. Her ancestors had survived worse than a cold house and a missed meal. She was keeping her son's dream alive. That was what family did. Suddenly, the crunch of tires on the icy gravel of the driveway shattered the silence. Janice's eyes snapped open. The grandfather clock read 7:45 p.m. It was a Tuesday. Nobody came on Tuesdays. Marcus and Chloe only ever came by on the first of the month, and her daughter Maya lived 40 minutes away and usually visited on Sunday afternoons after church. Footsteps marched up the front porch. A key slid into the deadbolt. Click. The heavy wooden front door swung open, bringing a gust of freezing wind into the foyer. "Mom?" It was Maya. Her voice was loud, vibrant, and filled with the kind of fierce, unapologetic energy that always reminded Janice of herself 30 years ago. Maya was a 34-year-old registered nurse, practical, observant, and impossible to lie to. "Mom, "Are you in here? Why is it pitch black?" Maya called out, the sound of her heavy winter boots thudding against the hardwood floor. Janice fumbled in the dark, trying to throw off the heavy blankets. She didn't want Maya to see her like this. She didn't want the questions. "I'm in the living room, baby," Janice called back, her voice raspy from disuse. "Don't trip over the coffee table." A second later, the hallway chandelier blazed to life. The sudden, harsh light made Janice wince, raising a swollen hand to shield her eyes. Maya stepped into the living room, her hand still hovering over the light switch. She was wearing her blue nursing scrubs under a heavy parka. As Maya looked at her mother, the warm smile on her face instantly vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unfiltered shock. Janice knew what her daughter was seeing. She saw a 68-year-old woman buried under a mountain of mismatched blankets, wearing a wool beanie indoors, her breath actually visible in the cold air of her own living room. "Mom," Maya whispered, stepping further into the room. She unzipped her parka, and immediately a shiver ran through her body. "Good Lord, Mom. It is freezing in here. It's colder in your house than it is on the porch." Maya marched straight past Janice and over to the thermostat on the wall. She tapped the screen. Blank. She tapped it harder. "Maya, leave it be," Janice said gently, trying to force a reassuring smile. "It's just a little chilly. I had the repairman look at it. The blower motor is broken, waiting on a part." It was a lie. The heater worked perfectly fine. She just couldn't afford the gas bill this month. Maya turned around, her dark eyes narrowing. As a nurse, she was trained to assess situations quickly. She looked at the unplugged lamps. She looked at the layers of clothing on her mother. She looked at her mother's face, the slight hollowness in Janice's cheeks that hadn't been there at Thanksgiving. "A broken blower motor," Maya repeated, her voice dropping an octave. "In January, and you didn't call me? You didn't come stay at my apartment?" "I'm fine, Maya. I like the quiet. I was just resting my eyes." Maya didn't argue. Instead, she took a deep breath, her nurse instincts taking over. "Okay, fine. Let's get some heat in your body. I brought some leftover lasagna from last night, but first I'm making you a pot of tea." Before Janice could protest, Maya turned on her heel and headed straight for the kitchen. Panic flared in Janice's chest. The kitchen. "Maya, wait! I don't need any tea," Janice called out, struggling to push herself up from the deep armchair. Her arthritic knees popped in protest. "Maya, don't," but she was too late. The fluorescent lights of the kitchen flickered on. Janice hobbled into the kitchen just in time to see Maya standing in front of the open refrigerator. The harsh white light from the fridge illuminated Maya's face, casting long shadows across the kitchen tiles. Maya stood perfectly still, holding the refrigerator door open. She didn't speak. She just stared. Janice stopped in the doorway, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She felt a deep, burning wave of shame wash over her. It was a humiliating, suffocating heat that started in her neck and rushed to her face. Inside the large, double-door stainless steel refrigerator, a fridge that used to be packed with Tupperware containers of soul food, fresh vegetables, sweet tea, and treats for her grandchildren, there was almost nothing. On the top shelf sat a half-cut lemon wrapped tightly in plastic wrap. On the middle shelf, a plastic pitcher of tap water. On the door, a bottle of expired mustard and a half-empty jar of mayonnaise. That was it. Maya slowly closed the refrigerator door. The soft thud sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house. Without a word, Maya pivoted and opened the pantry doors. Empty shelves stared back at them. A single box of generic brand saltine crackers. One can of low-sodium chicken noodle soup. A box of chamomile tea. Maya closed the pantry. She leaned her hands flat against the cold granite countertop, her head bowed. For a long, excruciating moment, the only sound in the kitchen was Maya's heavy breathing. When Maya finally lifted her head and turned to look at Janice, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, unadulterated fury. "Mom," Maya said, her voice shaking with an emotion she was trying desperately to control. "Where is the food?" Janice swallowed hard, clutching the edges of her thick sweater. I just haven't been to the grocery store this week, baby. The roads were icy and my knees—" "Stop," Maya interrupted, her voice cracking like a whip. "Do not lie to me. Not you. You have never lied to me in my entire life. Do not start today." Maya walked across the kitchen, pulled out one of the wooden dining chairs, and guided Janice to sit down. Maya then pulled up a chair and sat directly facing her mother, their knees almost touching. "Mom, look at me," Maya commanded softly. Janice kept her eyes focused on the intricate pattern of the hardwood floor. She couldn't meet her daughter's gaze. The shame was too heavy. A woman who had provided for everyone, a woman who had stood tall her whole life, now reduced to starving in the dark. Maya reached out and gently took Janice's cold, swollen hands in her own warm ones. "Mom, you worked for the Philadelphia School District for 35 years. Daddy worked for the city. When he passed, he left you secure. Your pension and his annuity. You take home $10,000 a month. $10,000. Maya squeezed her hands. "Why are you sitting in the dark, wearing 3 sweaters with half a lemon in your refrigerator?" Janice felt a tear slip hot and fast down her cheek. "It's Marcus," she whispered, the truth finally breaking through the dam of her pride. "His business, Maya. It's struggling. He needed help." Maya's jaw tightened. "Marcus's business has been struggling for 2 years. What kind of help?" He said it was a liquidity issue," Janice recited, clinging to the big corporate words her son had used to make the theft sound professional. "He needed to show the bank that he had consistent capital flow. So Chloe and Marcus set up a direct transfer. My pension goes into their corporate holding account. They pay my bills from there and give me an allowance until the business secures its next big city contract." Maya stared at her mother, completely motionless. "They give you an allowance?" Janice nodded slowly. "Chloe came by today." "How much, Mom?" Maya's voice was dangerously calm. "How much is your allowance from your $10,000 check?" Janice looked away, her voice dropping to a shameful whisper. $50. Maya closed her eyes. A single tear escaped, rolling down her cheek. She let go of Janice's hands and sat back in her chair. $50, Maya repeated, her voice hollow. "They take $10,000 and they give you $50. They didn't pay your gas bill, did they? Marcus said things were tight this month." "Mom, there is no heat. There is no food," Maya exploded, standing up so fast her chair scraped harshly against the floor. She began pacing the length of the kitchen, her hands running frantically through her braided hair. "Do you know what I saw on Instagram today, Mom, before Chloe blocked me?" Janice looked up, confused. "Blocked you?" "Chloe got a new car," Maya laughed, a harsh, bitter sound devoid of any humor. "A brand new, custom-ordered Tesla Model X. She posted a video of herself holding a $1,000 Hermes steering wheel cover. And Marcus? Marcus posted a picture from a steakhouse downtown where a single ribeye costs $150. Captioned it, 'Hard work pays off.'" Janice felt the air leave her lungs. It felt like she had been physically struck in the chest. "No," she whispered. "No, Marcus wouldn't. He said they were tightening their belts. He said they had to cancel their trip." "They didn't cancel anything, Mom. They are living like royalty, and they left you here to freeze to death." Maya walked back to the table and slammed her hands down. "They used your love against you. They used your guilt. They knew you would never say no to your only son." Janice shook her head in denial, her hands trembling violently. "You don't understand business, Maya. He said it's just until the city contract." "There is no city contract," Maya yelled, her voice echoing off the kitchen walls. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and forced herself to calm down. She looked at her mother, broken, cold, and hungry. Yelling wouldn't fix this. Maya slowly pulled out her chair and sat back down. She looked at her mother with a chilling, absolute resolve. Slowly, deliberately, Maya reached up to her ears. Janice watched as her daughter unclasped the heavy 14-karat gold hoop earrings she was wearing. Janice had bought those earrings for Maya when she graduated from nursing school. They were a symbol of strength, of coming into one's own power. Maya took the right earring off and placed it on the wooden table. Click. She took the left earring off and placed it next to the right. Click. It was a small gesture, but the weight of it filled the room. It was the physical manifestation of taking off the kid gloves. The time for being the polite, quiet sister was over. The time for peacekeeping was dead. Maya looked her mother dead in the eyes. The sadness in Maya's gaze was gone, replaced by a cold, protective fury. "Mom," Maya said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Tomorrow morning, at 9 a.m. sharp, you and I are driving to your bank." Panic seized Janice. "Maya, no. If we freeze the account, Marcus said the business will collapse. He could go bankrupt. He's my son." He stopped being a son the minute he let his mother sit in the dark without a meal. Maya cut her off, her words slicing through the freezing air like a scalpel. I don't care about his business. I don't care about Chloe's car. I care about you. Tomorrow we go to the bank. We pull the statements. We see exactly where every single dime of your money has gone for the last 2 years. And if he finds out? Janice asked, her voice trembling with a fear she couldn't hide. She hated conflict. She had spent her whole life trying to keep the family together. Maya leaned forward, her eyes locked onto her mother's. Let him find out, Maya said softly, because by the time I'm done with them, freezing in the dark is going to look like a luxury. Janice looked at her daughter, then looked down at the gold earrings resting on the table. For the first time in months, sitting in her freezing dark kitchen, a tiny spark ignited deep within Janice's chest. It wasn't warmth. It was the beginning of a fire. The morning sun over Philadelphia was bright, but offered absolutely no warmth. At 8:55 a.m., the First Trust Bank on Broad Street was quiet, the glass doors locked, the interior still waking up. Janice stood outside the glass, her breath pluming in the freezing air. She had worn her Sunday best, a modest navy wool coat and her favorite pearl brooch. For 35 years, she had walked into this bank as a respected member of the community. She knew the tellers by name. She had deposited her paychecks here, opened her children's first savings accounts here, and wept in the manager's office the day she came to close her late husband Henry's individual checking account. Today, she felt like a stranger. Worse, she felt like a suspect in her own life. Maya stood beside her, a cup of black coffee in her hand, radiating an uncompromising energy. When the bank manager, a polite man named Mr. Henderson, unlocked the doors at exactly 9 a.m., Maya did not hesitate. She took her mother's arm and marched straight past the teller line toward his glass-walled office. Mrs. Thompson, Maya, it's good to see you, Mr. Henderson said, looking slightly surprised as they entered. Please sit down. How can I help you this morning? Janice opened her mouth to speak, her throat dry, but Maya took the lead. Mr. Henderson, Maya said, her voice completely stripped of its usual warmth. My mother needs a complete audit of her primary checking and savings accounts for the last 24 months. Every deposit, every withdrawal, every transfer. Mr. Henderson blinked, adjusting his glasses. Of course. Is there a specific discrepancy you are concerned about? Janice looked down at her hands. Her knuckles were white, clutching her leather purse. Just everything, please, David, she whispered. Mr. Henderson turned to his computer. The clicking of his keyboard sounded like a gavel striking a block. Click, click, click. Janice held her breath. She expected him to turn around and say it was all a misunderstanding, that there was a healthy reserve, that her son was managing things responsibly. Instead, Mr. Henderson stopped typing. He leaned closer to his monitor, a deep crease forming between his brows. He clicked the mouse a few more times, his expression shifting from polite customer service to genuine professional concern. Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Henderson started, his voice dropping to a cautious murmur. I see the monthly $10,000 deposits from the school district in the annuity, but they don't stay in the account for more than 48 hours. Where do they go? Maya demanded, leaning forward. An automated clearinghouse transfer is triggered on the 3rd of every month, Mr. Henderson explained, turning the monitor slightly so they could see the screen. The funds are swept entirely into an external business account registered to Thompson Construction, LLC. Janice felt the room tilt. All of it? She asked, her voice barely a breath. He doesn't leave anything for the bills? Mr. Henderson looked at her with profound pity. As of this morning, Mrs. Thompson, your available checking balance is $14.32. Your savings account was drained and closed 18 months ago. $14.32. A lifetime of grading papers. 30 years of standing on her feet. Decades of Henry working double shifts for the city, sacrificing vacations so they could build a nest egg. Reduced to the cost of a cheap diner breakfast. How is this legal? Maya asked, her anger vibrating in the small office. How does a bank allow a senior citizen's entire pension to be siphoned out without raising a single red flag? Mr. Henderson sighed heavily, pulling a thick folder from a drawer. Because, Maya, 18 months ago, Marcus submitted a comprehensive general power of attorney. It was notarized. It grants him unlimited unilateral authority to execute wire transfers, open or close accounts, and manage all financial assets in your mother's name. As far as the bank's automated systems are concerned, Marcus is Mrs. Thompson. Janice stared at the paper Mr. Henderson placed on the desk. There was her signature, shaky, but hers. She remembered the day she signed it. Marcus had brought her a bouquet of lilies. He had kissed her cheek. He told her she deserved to rest, that she shouldn't have to worry about complex bank forms anymore. He hadn't taken her money. She had handed him the keys to the vault. "Freeze it," Maya said, slicing through Janice's spiraling thoughts. "Revoke the power of attorney and freeze the account right now." "I can initiate the revocation," Mr. Henderson said carefully, "but the funds that have already been transferred to Thompson Construction are legally out of our jurisdiction. You will need to look at the corporate accounts to see where the money went from there." "Then that's exactly what we are going to do," Maya said, standing up. An hour later, Janice and Maya were sitting in a quiet booth at a diner down the street from the bank. Janice hadn't touched her coffee. She was numb. The shock had acted like an anesthetic, freezing her emotions before the real pain could set in. Maya had her laptop open, frantically typing. As a nurse, Maya dealt with trauma by looking at the data. Vitals, charts, facts. She had called in a favor from her best friend Sarah, who worked as a forensic auditor for a mid-sized accounting firm. Sarah had access to public commercial databases and corporate filing records. "Mom," Maya said, her eyes glued to the glowing screen. "Marcus told you the business was failing, right? That he needed your pension to show liquidity to the banks to secure a big city contract?" Janice nodded slowly. "A liquidity bottleneck. He said supply chain issues were choking the construction firm. He said he and Chloe were making terrible sacrifices." "Lies," Maya spat, hitting the enter key so hard the laptop shook. Every single word was a calculated, manipulative lie. Maya spun the laptop around to face Janice. The screen was filled with spreadsheets and corporate filings. "Sarah just pulled the public records for Thompson Construction, LLC, Maya explained, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at the screen. "Mom, Marcus hasn't bid on a city contract in 2 years. In fact, his company hasn't had an active, permitted construction site in 18 months. The business isn't struggling to survive. The business is dead. It's a shell." Janice squinted at the numbers. "I don't understand. If there's no business, where did my $240,000 go over the last 2 years?" "It didn't go to cement or steel or payroll," Maya said, her voice thick with disgust. She clicked on another file, opening a series of credit card summaries linked to the corporate account that Sarah had legally unearthed through a vendor inquiry. "It went to Chloe." Maya began reading down the list, and with every word, the icy numbness in Janice's chest cracked, replaced by a burning, suffocating heat. $3,000 a month for a luxury apartment lease in downtown Philly, an apartment they use as a corporate office but is actually just Chloe's private dressing room, Maya read. $1,200 at Saks Fifth Avenue, $800 at a high-end med spa for Botox and fillers, $5,000 for a VIP week in Aspen. And the Tesla? The lease payments are being drawn directly from the account your pension feeds into. Janice felt physically sick. She pressed a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide as she looked at the list of vanity and excess. While Janice had been sitting in the freezing dark, counting saltines and wrapped in 3 sweaters, Chloe had been injecting her face with expensive chemicals. While Janice had been too ashamed to ask her church friends for a ride to the grocery store, Marcus had been paying for VIP bottle service in Aspen. It wasn't a desperate son making a foolish business mistake to save his family's legacy. It was a systematic, malicious bleeding of an old woman to fund an illusion of wealth. They had turned Janice's lifetime of hard work into their personal ATM. "He said they were tightening their belts," Janice whispered, a tear finally breaking free and tracking down her cheek. "My own son. He's a coward, Mom," Maya said, reaching across the table to grip Janice's arm. "And Chloe is a parasite. But we are cutting them off. I revoked the bank access. Your next pension check comes in 5 days, and it's going into a new account that only you control. The gravy train is over. They are going to have to face the real world." For a brief, fleeting moment, Janice felt a sense of relief. The bleeding had stopped. They would have to confront Marcus. There would be screaming and tears, but she would survive. She still had her home. She could turn the heat back on. She could rebuild. But Maya was still scrolling through the background check Sarah had sent. Suddenly, Maya stopped. The color drained completely from Maya's face. Her eyes widened, scanning the same line of text over and over again, as if hoping the words would magically rearrange themselves into something less devastating. "Maya?" Janice asked, sensing the sudden shift in the air. "What is it? What else?" Maya didn't answer. Her hand hovered over the mouse, trembling. "No," she whispered. "No, he wouldn't. He couldn't." "Maya, tell me!" Janice demanded, finding her voice. Maya slowly looked up from the screen. Her eyes were filled with absolute terror. "Mom," Maya said, her voice cracking. "When Dad died, he made sure the mortgage was paid off, right? He used his life insurance to clear the deed. You own the house outright." "Yes," Janice said, her heart accelerating. "We burned the mortgage papers in the backyard in 2015. It's mine. Why?" Maya turned the screen toward Janice. Her finger pointed to a section labeled Real Estate and Encumbrances. "Sarah ran a comprehensive credit pull," Maya said, her words coming out rushed and panicked. "Mom, there is a lien on your house." "A lien?" Janice shook her head. "That's impossible. I don't owe anyone. I pay my property taxes." "It's not the city," Maya said, swallowing hard. 4 months ago, a massive loan was taken out against the equity of your property, $300,000. The world seemed to stop spinning. The sounds of the diner, the clinking of silverware, the waitress calling out orders, faded into a dull underwater hum. 300,000, Janice repeated, the number too massive to comprehend. "From who? First Trust Bank?" "No," Maya said, scrolling down to reveal the lender's name. "Apex Capital Group. It's a shadow lender, a private equity firm that deals in high-risk subprime lending. They give loans to people who banks won't touch. Loan sharks in suits, Mom. And the interest rate. My God, it's an adjustable rate currently sitting at 19%. Janice gripped the edge of the table, her head spinning dizzily. "But how? How could Marcus borrow against my house? The power of attorney?" "A standard power of attorney isn't enough to secure a mortgage or transfer a deed on real property without the primary owner's explicit presence and signature in the state of Pennsylvania," Maya said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register. "The lender requires a notarized signature on the physical deed transfer." Janice stared at her daughter. The implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Marcus had not just manipulated her into signing away her checking account. He had not just lied about his business. To get $300,000 from a predatory lender, Marcus had forged his mother's signature on a legal deed document. He had committed a federal crime. "Where is the money, Maya?" Janice asked, her voice turning completely hollow. "If he got $300,000 4 months ago, where is it?" Maya clicked rapidly, bringing up the corporate ledger again. She scanned the transactions from 4 months prior. "He didn't put it in the business," Maya whispered. "It looks like, Mom, he used it to pay off his own personal debts. The IRS was coming after him for unpaid back taxes on the LLC. He paid off the IRS. He paid off Chloe's credit cards. And the rest is gone. Blew through it." "And the loan on my house?" Janice asked, her chest tightening so painfully she thought she might be having a heart attack. "Who is paying the monthly mortgage to these loan sharks?" Maya looked at the ledger, her eyes filling with tears. "The monthly payment is $4,800. According to this, he hasn't made a single payment since he took out the loan. He's 4 months in arrears." Janice couldn't breathe. The air in the diner felt thin and useless. Marcus had stolen her liquid cash to buy his wife designer bags. And when he got in trouble with the IRS, he had stolen her home, her sanctuary, the only physical piece of Henry she had left, to save his own skin. And then he had abandoned the payments. "If he's 4 months behind," Janice managed to say, her voice shaking violently. "What does that mean, Maya? What does Apex Capital Group do?" Maya closed the laptop. She reached across the table and grabbed both of Janice's hands, gripping them with desperate strength. "It means they are going to foreclose, Mom," Maya said, a tear finally breaking free and dropping onto the table. "They are going to take the house." Janice sat frozen. The cold she had felt earlier that morning in her dark living room was nothing compared to the absolute freezing void that now opened up inside her chest. She had sacrificed everything for her son. She had starved in the dark so he could succeed. And in return, Marcus had sold the ground right out from under her feet. The image of Chloe's smug face, handing her a $50 bill while driving a Tesla bought with Janice's blood and sweat, flashed through her mind. The image of Marcus, wearing a sharp suit and smelling of expensive cologne, lying straight to her face about a liquidity bottleneck while forging her name on a deed. Janice closed her eyes. The pain, the betrayal, the unbearable heartbreak of a mother realizing her child was a monster, it crested and broke over her like a tidal wave. But as the wave receded, it left something else behind. It left cold, hard rock. When Janice opened her eyes, the tears were gone. The frightened, shivering old woman who had hidden under blankets the night before had vanished, replaced by the formidable, sharp-minded woman who had commanded classrooms for 35 years. "Maya," Janice said, her voice deadly calm, stripped of all motherly softness. "Yes, Mom?" "Pack your laptop," Janice ordered, sliding out of the booth and standing up straight. The arthritis in her knees didn't seem to bother her anymore. Adrenaline is a powerful drug. "We are going back to the house, and you are going to call your brother and tell him I want to see him. Right now." Maya looked up at her mother, seeing the terrifying transformation. "Mom, what are we going to do?" Janice picked up her purse, her jaw set like stone. "We are going to let him dig his own grave," Janice said. "And then we are going to bury him in it." The white Tesla Model X glided into Janice's icy driveway like a spaceship landing in a graveyard. Watching from the living room window, Janice felt a cold detachment settle over her. She watched her son, Marcus, step out of the driver's side. He was wearing a camel hair overcoat that looked brand new, his leather shoes crunching softly against the frost. From the passenger side emerged Chloe. She was draped in a tailored cream coat, holding a beige Hermes Birkin bag defensively against her chest, as if the modest suburban neighborhood might somehow contaminate it. They looked like the picture of upper-middle-class success. They looked like the American dream. Janice knew they were nothing but well-dressed thieves. "They're here," Janice said quietly, not turning away from the window. Maya stood by the fireplace, her arms crossed tight against her chest. She had turned the heat back on, the furnace rumbling to life beneath the floorboards, fighting the bitter chill that had settled into the walls. The front door chimed. Marcus used his key, pushing the door open with a forced, booming cheerfulness that immediately set Janice's teeth on edge. "Hey, Mama," Marcus called out, stepping into the foyer and rubbing his hands together. "Maya said it was urgent. Is the furnace acting up again? I told you we need to get that repairman out here." Chloe followed him inside, not bothering to take off her designer sunglasses. "Honestly, Janice, we had a brunch reservation at the Rittenhouse in 20 minutes. This better be a real emergency." Janice turned away from the window. She didn't offer a hug. She didn't offer to take their coats. She just stared at them, her posture perfectly straight, her hands clasped in front of her like she was preparing to address a classroom of severely delinquent students. "Take off your glasses in my house, Chloe," Janice said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it possessed the sharp, unquestionable authority of a veteran teacher. Chloe paused, a condescending smirk playing on her lips, but she slowly slid the sunglasses down. "Excuse me?" "Sit down," Maya commanded from the fireplace, pointing to the 2 armchairs opposite the sofa. Marcus blinked, his fake smile faltering. He looked at Maya, then at his mother. The atmosphere in the room was heavy, suffocating. "Whoa, okay. What is this? An intervention?" He let out a nervous chuckle that died instantly in the silent room. "Sit," Janice repeated. Marcus and Chloe exchanged a glance and slowly sat down. Chloe placed her Birkin bag prominently on her lap, a shield of exorbitant wealth. Janice walked over and sat on the sofa. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She reached into her modest leather purse, pulled out the thick folder Maya had printed at the diner, and dropped it onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy, final thwack. "I went to the bank this morning, Marcus," Janice said, her tone perfectly even. The color vanished from Marcus's face so fast it was as if someone had pulled a plug. He stared at the folder, his throat bobbing as he swallowed hard. Chloe's posture stiffened, her manicured nails digging into the leather of her bag. "Mama," Marcus started, his voice instantly dropping an octave, slipping into a desperate, placating tone. "I can explain. The bank doesn't understand the corporate restructuring. The liquidity—" "Stop using words you don't understand to steal from me," Janice cut him off. The sheer ice in her voice made Marcus physically flinch. "I know about the $240,000 you drained from my pension over the last 2 years. I know there is no city contract. I know your construction company hasn't poured a single yard of concrete in 18 months. Chloe immediately went on the offensive. She sat up straighter, adopting the tone of a persecuted martyr. Janice, you don't understand the pressure Marcus is under. We are trying to build generational wealth. Do you know how hard it is to maintain an image in the corporate world? If we don't look successful, we don't get the deals. We used your money to keep this family's future alive. You used my money to buy a Tesla, Chloe, Maya fired back, taking a step toward them. You used it for Botox. You used it to lease a luxury apartment to play dress-up in while my mother sat freezing in the dark eating stale crackers. We are family, Chloe snapped, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. Family helps family. We were going to pay her back with interest as soon as the next project closed. There is no project, Maya yelled. And there is no money, Marcus suddenly cried out, burying his face in his hands. The facade of the successful businessman crumbled entirely, leaving behind a terrified, pathetic little boy. It's gone, Mama. All of it. The IRS came after me. The suppliers sued us. I tried to fix it. I swear to God I tried to trade my way out of it, but the debt just kept growing. Marcus slid off the armchair, dropping to his knees on the rug in front of Janice. He reached out to grab her hands, but she pulled them back, tucking them into her lap. Mama, please, Marcus begged, tears streaming down his face, ruining his expensive cologne with the stench of pure fear. You can't call the police. That's fraud. That's elder abuse. They'll put me in federal prison, Mama. I wouldn't survive it. Please, I'm your son. Janice looked down at the man kneeling before her. She searched her heart for the instinct to protect him, the maternal urge that had defined her entire life. But she found only ashes. If the pension money was all you took, Janice said, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, I might have let you walk away, Marcus. I might have just cut you out of my life and mourned the son I thought I raised. Marcus stopped crying. He froze, his eyes widening. But you didn't stop at the cash, did you? Janice continued, leaning forward. You forged my signature. You went to Apex Capital Group. Chloe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Marcus scrambled backward, his eyes darting frantically toward the front door, as if calculating if he could outrun his crimes. $300,000 against my house, Janice said, feeling the familiar tightening in her chest, the suffocating panic trying to claw its way back up. A shadow loan at 19% interest, and you haven't made a payment in 4 months. I was going to pay it, Marcus stammered, his whole body shaking. I had a crypto investor. He promised me a return. You gambled my home, Janice screamed, the facade of the calm teacher finally shattering. She stood up, her whole body trembling with righteous fury. You gambled the house your father broke his back to pay for. You forged my name, and you gambled my sanctuary. Before Marcus could utter another pathetic excuse, a sound shattered the heavy air in the living room. Boom, boom, boom. It wasn't a doorbell. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the aggressive, heavy pounding of a closed fist against the solid wood of the front door. It sounded like a threat. Everyone in the room froze. Did you call the cops? Chloe shrieked, backing away from Maya. I didn't call anyone yet, Maya said, her eyes narrowing as she moved toward the foyer. Boom, boom, boom. Open up, Apex Capital Group. We have a legal notice of default. A gruff, booming voice shouted from the porch. All the blood drained from Marcus's face. No, he whispered, scrambling to his feet. No, they said I had until the end of the month. Maya yanked the front door open. Standing on the porch were 2 men. They weren't wearing bank teller uniforms. They wore ill-fitting, dark suits over thick builds. They looked like bouncers who had been handed briefcases. Janice Thompson? The lead man asked, stepping right to the threshold, his boots tracking dirty snow onto the hardwood. He didn't wait for an invitation. I am Janice, she said, stepping out of the living room, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. The man pulled a thick legal document with a red stamp across the top from his briefcase and shoved it toward her. Notice of intent to foreclose and demand for possession. Your loan is 120 days in default. Apex Capital is exercising its right to seize the collateral. This is my home, Janice said, her voice shaking as she refused to take the paper. My son forged that loan. I never saw a dime of that money. The man dropped the envelope at her feet. His expression was bored, completely devoid of empathy. He dealt with weeping, desperate people every day. Take it up with the judge, lady. The deed has a notarized signature. As far as the state of Pennsylvania is concerned, you owe us $356,000, including late fees and penalties. He looked at his watch. You have exactly 7 days to vacate the premises before the county sheriff arrives to forcefully remove you and padlock the doors. Have a nice day. The two men turned and walked back down the driveway, getting into a black, unmarked SUV. Janice stared at the envelope on the floor. 7 days. In 1 week, she would be homeless. A 68-year-old woman with $14 in her bank account and nowhere to go. She turned slowly to look at Marcus. But it was Chloe who spoke first. The panic in the daughter-in-law's eyes had instantly morphed into a vicious, cornered cruelty. "Well, this is your fault, Janice," Chloe yelled, her voice echoing in the foyer. Maya looked at Chloe like she had grown 2 heads. "Are you insane? You stole her money." "The house is in her name." Chloe pointed a sharp acrylic nail at Janice. If she hadn't been so stingy, if she had just taken out a proper loan for Marcus to begin with, he wouldn't have had to go to those loan sharks. "We are ruined because of you. And don't think you're moving in with us when they kick you out, because we don't have the space." Janice felt the room begin to spin. The walls of the foyer seemed to bow inward, the stress of the revelation, the terror of the foreclosure, the sheer venomous audacity of Chloe's words. But mostly it was the physical toll. Janice hadn't eaten a proper meal in weeks. Her body had been freezing, surviving on saltines and tap water, running purely on the fumes of maternal endurance. Now, the adrenaline crashed. A loud, high-pitched ringing filled Janice's ears. The faces of Maya, Marcus, and Chloe blurred together into a swirling mass of colors. "Mom!" Maya's voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. "Mom, look at me!" Janice tried to take a breath, but her chest refused to expand. Her knees buckled. The last thing she felt was Maya's arms wrapping desperately around her before the world went entirely black. Beep, beep, beep. The steady synthetic rhythm of a heart monitor was the first thing Janice recognized. She opened her eyes to the harsh, sterile glow of fluorescent hospital lights. The smell of iodine and bleach filled her nose. She was lying in a hospital bed, an IV line taped to the back of her bruised hand. "Mom! Oh, thank God!" Maya was sitting in a plastic chair next to the bed, her eyes red and puffy. She immediately stood up, pressing the call button for the nurse. "What happened?" Janice croaked, her throat painfully dry. "You collapsed," Maya said, pouring a small cup of water and holding the straw to Janice's lips. "The doctor said it was acute stress compounded by severe malnutrition and dehydration. Mom, your blood sugar was dangerously low. You practically starved yourself." The memories of this living room, the men in the suits, the eviction notice, all came crashing back. Janice closed her eyes, a heavy tear slipping down her temple into her graying hair. "Where is Marcus?" Janice whispered. "I threw him and his monster of a wife out," Maya said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I told him if he ever came near you again, I would kill him myself before the police got to him." Janice looked up at the ceiling. 7 days. She had to pack 30 years of memories in 7 days. "Maya, what are we going to do? Where am I going to go?" "You're coming to live with me," Maya said fiercely. "I have a pull-out couch. It's small, but we will make it work. I promise you, Mom. We will fight this." Janice nodded slowly. She felt utterly defeated. They had won. Marcus and Chloe had taken everything. "Maya," Janice said softly, a sudden thought piercing through her brain fog. "Before you threw them out, did Marcus say what they were going to do?" "He was crying, saying he was ruined. Chloe was just screaming about her credit score." Maya sighed, rubbing her eyes. "Why?" Janice frowned. Something bothered her. The sheer coldness of Chloe's declaration. "Don't think you're moving in with us." If they knew the foreclosure was coming, what was their plan for her? Did they really just expect her to sleep on a park bench? "Maya, bring me your laptop," Janice said, her voice finding a sudden edge. "Mom, you need to rest. Bring me the laptop, Maya, now." Reluctantly, Maya pulled her laptop from her tote bag and opened it, setting it on the tray table over Janice's lap. "Marcus has used the same email address since he was in college," Janice muttered, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "He is lazy. He never changes his passwords. When he helped me set up my iPad 3 years ago, he used his own account to log into the App Store." Janice typed in his email address, mthompson_builds@gmail.com. Mom, hacking his email is illegal, Maya warned, though she didn't try to stop her. Stealing a house is illegal, Janice replied coldly. She went to the password field. He always used the name of his childhood dog and his birth year, Buster1988. She hit enter. The screen loaded. They were in. Search for emails from Chloe, Janice instructed. Maya leaned in, operating the trackpad. She typed Chloe's email address into the search bar. Hundreds of emails populated, mostly receipts for online shopping, flight confirmations, and calendar invites. Filter by the last 2 months, Janice said, her heart beating faster. When they knew the loan was in default. Maya applied the filter. The list shrank to about a dozen emails. One subject line, dated 3 weeks ago, stood out like a flashing neon sign. Subject: FWD Admission Availability, Shady Pines State Facility. Maya's breath hitched. She clicked on the email. It was a forwarded message from a state-appointed social worker, sent originally to Chloe, who had then forwarded it to Marcus with her own commentary added at the top. Maya read Chloe's words out loud, her voice shaking with absolute horror. Babe, I finally found a place that will take her without requiring a private deposit. It's a state-run Medicaid dump over in the West Ward. Once Apex seizes the house next month, we can't let her come live with us. She'll ruin the aesthetic of the apartment and she complains too much. The day the sheriff kicks her out, I've arranged for a medical transport to pick her up under the guise of an emergency psychiatric hold due to dementia. They'll process her as a ward of the state. We wipe our hands clean, minimize our liability, and move on. Do not tell Maya until it's done. Silence fell over the hospital room. It was a thick, suffocating silence. Janice stared at the screen. She read the words, Medicaid dump, ruin the aesthetic, and ward of the state over and over again until the letters blurred. They weren't just going to let her lose her house. They had actively conspired to have her committed to a dilapidated, state-run facility for the homeless and mentally ill. They were going to strip away her freedom, her sanity, and her dignity, just so she wouldn't be an inconvenience to their lifestyle. Maya covered her mouth, stifling a sob. Mom, they were going to throw you away. Like garbage. Janice didn't cry. The time for tears was over. The deep, crushing pain of a mother's broken heart suddenly crystallized into something entirely different. It turned into a cold, diamond-hard weapon. Slowly, Janice reached up and pulled the IV tape off her hand. Mom, what are you doing? Maya panicked, reaching out to stop her. Janice ignored her, pulling the needle out of her vein and pressing a cotton ball against the dot of blood. She pushed the blankets off and swung her legs over the side of the hospital bed, her bare feet hitting the cold linoleum floor. Mom, the doctor said you need to stay on fluids for 24 hours. Janice looked at her daughter. The terrified, freezing, starving old woman was dead. The woman standing in the hospital gown was someone Chloe and Marcus had never met. Get my clothes, Maya, Janice said, her voice ringing with absolute terrifying clarity. We don't have 24 hours to waste. Where are we going? Maya asked, stunned by the sheer force of her mother's presence. Janice looked out the hospital window at the city skyline. We are going to find a shark of our own, Janice said quietly. I am going to take everything from them, down to the designer shoes on that woman's feet. The drive back from the hospital was enveloped in a profound, heavy silence. Maya kept glancing at her mother in the passenger seat, her hands gripping the steering wheel tight. She expected Janice to be weeping. She expected her to be fragile, broken by the sheer, monstrous reality of the nursing home email. But Janice was not crying. She was staring straight ahead at the icy Philadelphia roads, her posture rigid, her expression carved from granite. The warmth, the maternal instinct to forgive, the desperate desire to protect her only son, it had all burned away, leaving behind a terrifying, unshakable clarity. Mom! Maya finally broke the silence as they pulled into the driveway of the house Janice was scheduled to lose in exactly 6 days. I know a detective in the financial crimes unit. I can call him right now. We can have Marcus arrested by dinner. Janice didn't move her eyes from the windshield. No. Maya blinked, stunned. No? Mom, he forged your signature on a deed. He stole $250,000. And Chloe was going to have you committed to a state ward. They belong in handcuffs. Handcuffs are too easy, Janice said, her voice dropping to a smooth, chilling register. She unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to face her daughter. If he goes to jail today, Maya, what happens to the house? The foreclosure continues. The bank takes it. Apex Capital takes it. Chloe plays the victim, claims she knew nothing about the forgery, divorces him, and walks away with her Tesla and her Hermes bags. She survives, and I am left with nothing. Janice opened the car door, the freezing winter wind whipping around her. I don't just want him punished, Janice said, stepping out into the cold. I want my house back, and I want Chloe to feel exactly what I felt sitting in the dark. I want to take it all. 30 minutes later, Maya was on the phone, calling every legal contact she knew through the hospital's social work department. She wasn't looking for a public defender. She was looking for a shark. At 2 p.m., they found one. The law offices of Evelyn Vance were located on the top floor of a sleek glass building in Center City. Evelyn Vance was a 60-year-old powerhouse in a tailored charcoal suit, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. She exclusively practiced elder law and financial exploitation. She was notoriously expensive, notoriously aggressive, and notoriously successful. When Janice and Maya sat down in Evelyn's immaculate leather-scented office, Janice didn't waste time on pleasantries or tears. She placed the printed bank statements, the Apex Capital foreclosure notice, and the printed email about the Shady Pines nursing home directly onto the mahogany desk. They stole $240,000 from my pension, Janice stated cleanly. They forged a deed to take out a $300,000 shadow loan on my paid-off home. And when the loan defaulted, they plotted to commit me to a psychiatric ward to hide the evidence. Evelyn Vance didn't flinch. She picked up her reading glasses, slid them onto her nose, and began flipping through the documents. The only sound in this room was the crisp turning of pages and the distant hum of city traffic below. For 10 excruciating minutes, Evelyn read. When she reached the nursing home email, her jaw tightened infinitesimally. Finally, Evelyn took off her glasses and folded her hands on the desk. She looked directly at Janice. Mrs. Thompson, Evelyn said, her voice rich and steady. As a mother, I am deeply, profoundly sorry for what has been done to you. But as your attorney, I will tell you this. You have handed me a loaded shotgun, and I know exactly where to point it. Maya exhaled a breath she didn't know she was holding. So we can stop the foreclosure? Evelyn held up a finger. Let's separate the issues. The pension money, the $240,000, is gone. It was squandered on luxury goods and unsecured debt. Criminal charges will put Marcus in prison for that, but it won't put the cash back in your account. The primary emergency is the house. Evelyn picked up the notice of intent to foreclose from Apex Capital Group. Apex Capital is a predatory lender, but they aren't stupid, Evelyn explained, tapping the paper. They do not hand over $300,000 based solely on a general power of attorney. In the state of Pennsylvania, a power of attorney must contain explicit, specific language granting the right to encumber real estate. Even then, title companies and shadow lenders require the deed of trust to be signed in the physical presence of a licensed notary public to prevent exactly this kind of fraud. Janice frowned. But I never signed it. I never met with a notary from Apex Capital. Exactly, Evelyn said, her eyes narrowing with predatory focus. Which means Marcus didn't just forge your signature. He found a notary public willing to break the law, risk their license, and commit a first-degree felony by stamping a forged real estate document. Maya leaned forward. If the notary stamp is fraudulent, the deed is invalid. If we can prove the notary was complicit in the fraud, Evelyn corrected, the mortgage is rendered void ab initio, invalid from the start. Apex Capital loses their claim to your house. They become an unsecured creditor, and their only recourse is to sue Marcus personally for the $300,000. Your house is saved. So who notarized it? Janice asked, her heart beating a rapid rhythm. Evelyn turned to her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she accessed the county's digital deed registry. Let's pull the official recorded mortgage document from the county clerk's office and look at the signature page. The large monitor on Evelyn's desk flared to life, displaying a scanned copy of a dense legal document. Evelyn scrolled past pages of legalese, finally stopping on the last page. There at the bottom was Janice's forged signature. It was a remarkably good copy, tracing the loops of her cursive perfectly. But right below it was the heavy blue ink stamp of a notary public of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And across that stamp was a sprawling, messy signature. Janice stared at the screen. The air in her lungs turned to ice. She knew that signature. She had seen it on her husband's will. She had seen it on the closing documents of this very house 30 years ago. She had seen it on the Christmas cards they received every single year. "Arthur Davis," Janice whispered, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. Maya gasped, her hands flying to her face. "Mr. Davis? The family lawyer? Dad's friend?" Evelyn looked at Janice, her expression grave. "You know this man?" "Arthur Davis was my late husband's attorney," Janice said, her voice trembling not with fear, but with an earth-shattering sense of betrayal. "When Henry died, Arthur came to the funeral. He ate potato salad in my kitchen. He told me he would always look out for our family." "He looked out for himself," Maya spat, her fury reigniting. "Why would he do this? Why would a respected lawyer risk his entire career to help Marcus forge a deed?" "Let's find out," Evelyn said coldly. Evelyn picked up her desk phone and pressed a speed dial button. "Sarah, I need you to run an immediate forensic trace on the Thompson Construction LLC accounts. Specifically, look for any outgoing wire transfers, cashier's checks, or vendor payments made to the law offices of Arthur Davis, or to Arthur Davis personally, within 48 hours of the Apex Capital loan disbursement 4 months ago." They waited in silence. The minutes dragged by like hours. Janice stared at the blue notary stamp on the screen, feeling the last remaining threads of her trust in humanity snapping one by one. Her son was a thief. Her daughter-in-law was a monster. And the man who had shaken her husband's hand and promised to protect her had sold her out. The phone on Evelyn's desk buzzed. "Go ahead, Sarah," Evelyn said, putting it on speaker. "I found it, Ms. Vance," the voice on the other end said clearly. 3 days after the $300,000 Apex Capital loan was deposited into the Thompson Construction account, a wire transfer was initiated. Exactly $20,000 was moved to a Shell LLC registered to Arthur Davis. The memo line simply reads, "Consulting fee." Evelyn disconnected the call. She looked at Janice. $20,000, Evelyn said quietly. "That is what Arthur Davis charged your son to look the other way, stamp a forged deed, and hand your home over to loan sharks." Maya stood up, pacing the office. "This is a conspiracy. It's organized crime. We take this to the police right now. They'll all go down." "No," Janice said. Maya stopped pacing. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the absolute chilling calm in her client's voice. "Mrs. Thompson," Evelyn warned gently, "we have the silver bullet. With this evidence, I can file an emergency injunction tomorrow morning. We halt the eviction, we report Davis to the Bar Association, and we hand the fraud over to the district attorney." "If we hand it to the DA now, Marcus and Chloe will lawyer up," Janice said, her mind working with the strategic brilliance of a woman who had spent decades outsmarting rebellious teenagers. "They will hide whatever assets they have left. Chloe will drain the remaining accounts and file for divorce to protect herself. Arthur Davis will use his legal connections to drag the investigation out for years while I sit in a house tied up in litigation." Janice leaned forward, resting her forearms on Evelyn's mahogany desk. She looked the high-powered attorney dead in the eye. "Evelyn, I want to crush them," Janice said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "I want Chloe stripped of her luxury cars and her designer bags. I want Marcus to confess on paper. And I want Arthur Davis to look me in the eye when his career ends. I want to trap them in a room where they cannot lie, cannot run, and cannot hide behind lawyers." A slow, predatory smile spread across Evelyn Vance's face. She leaned back in her leather chair, steepling her fingers. "I like you, Mrs. Thompson. Tell me what you're thinking." Janice turned to Maya. "Maya, Marcus thinks I am terrified. He thinks I am weak, sick, and helpless. Chloe thinks I am just an obstacle waiting to be shipped off to a nursing home." "Which is exactly what we want them to think," Janice continued, the plan forming rapidly in her mind. "If a prey acts like it's defeated, the predators get sloppy." Janice outlined her strategy. It was a brilliant, devastating play on their greed and arrogance. She would call Marcus. She would cry on the phone. She would tell him that she couldn't handle the stress of the eviction, that her health was failing, and that she was surrendering. She would tell Marcus that she had spoken to Arthur Davis, the trusted family lawyer, and that she was willing to sign a formal quitclaim deed, officially handing the house over to Marcus to let him deal with Apex Capital, provided Marcus agreed to put her in a nice assisted living facility. "They will jump at it," Maya realized, her eyes widening as she saw her mother's genius. Marcus needs your real signature to legitimize the fraudulent loan if questions are ever asked. And Chloe will see it as her final victory. She gets the house legally, and she gets to throw you in the state ward anyway. Exactly, Janice said. We set the meeting at Arthur Davis's law office. He will want to mediate this to ensure his own tracks are covered. They will all be there, feeling safe, feeling victorious, ready to have me sign my life away. Evelyn Vance nodded slowly, thoroughly impressed. And instead of signing a quitclaim deed, I walk in with you, Janice finished. With the fraudulent notary proof, the bank statements, and the nursing home emails, we lock the door, and we give them a choice. A choice between absolute, immediate financial surrender, Evelyn mused, her eyes gleaming with the anticipation of a slaughter, or walking out of that office in handcuffs for federal bank fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. Can we do that legally? Maya asked, looking between the two formidable women. It's not blackmail if you are demanding the return of stolen assets and the unwinding of a fraudulent contract under the threat of lawful civil and criminal litigation, Evelyn clarified, her smile sharp as a razor. It's called aggressive negotiation. Janice stood up, the arthritis in her knees, the hunger in her belly, the cold that had plagued her for weeks. It was all entirely gone. She felt 10 feet tall. Draft the papers, Evelyn, Janice said. Draft a confession of judgment for Marcus. Draft an asset forfeiture agreement for Chloe's luxury goods to repay the stolen cash. And draft a resignation and surrender of license for Arthur Davis. Evelyn stood up, extending her hand. It will be my absolute pleasure, Mrs. Thompson. Janice shook the lawyer's hand. When Janice and Maya walked out of the glass building and back into the freezing Philadelphia air, the city didn't feel cold anymore. It felt electric. Janice pulled her phone from her purse. She dialed Marcus's number. It rang 3 times before he answered. Mama? His voice was hesitant, laced with guilt. Janice closed her eyes, channeling every ounce of weakness she could muster. She let her voice tremble. She let out a soft, pathetic sob. Marcus, Janice cried softly into the phone. Marcus, I can't do this anymore. The men in the suits, I'm so scared, baby. I don't want to fight you. I just want to rest. Mama? It's okay, Mama, I'm here, Marcus said, his voice instantly lifting with relief. The sucker had taken the bait. I talked to Mr. Davis, Janice lied perfectly. I want to give you the house, Marcus. I'll sign whatever you need. Just promise you'll find a place for me to go. Of course, Mama. Of course, Marcus said eagerly. Chloe and I will take care of everything. We'll meet at Arthur's office on Friday morning. I'll have the papers ready. It's going to be okay, Mama. I love you. I know you do, Janice whispered. I'll see you on Friday. She ended the call. Janice lowered the phone, her tears instantly vanishing. She looked at Maya, her eyes as cold and unforgiving as the winter sky. Friday, Janice said. The trap was set. The predators were walking blindly toward the cliff, and Janice was more than ready to push them over the edge. Friday morning arrived with a bitter, biting frost that coated the Philadelphia streets in a layer of deceptive glass. But inside the opulent mahogany-paneled law offices of Arthur Davis, the temperature was comfortably warm, smelling of expensive leather, fresh espresso, and arrogant security. Janice stepped off the private elevator onto the top floor, leaning heavily on Maya's arm. She wore an oversized, drab gray sweater and held a crumpled tissue in her trembling hand. She kept her eyes downcast, her shoulders hunched. To anyone watching, she looked exactly like what Marcus and Chloe needed her to be. A broken, terrified old woman, ready to surrender the last piece of her life just to make the nightmare stop. Mr. Davis is expecting you in the main conference room, the receptionist said with a polite, oblivious smile. Maya gently guided her mother down the plush-carpeted hallway. When they reached the heavy oak double doors, Maya pushed them open. Marcus, Chloe, and Arthur Davis were already seated around a massive glass conference table. Marcus looked up, visibly exhaling a massive sigh of relief. He wore a crisp navy suit, his hair perfectly styled. Chloe sat next to him, sipping a sparkling water. Her Hermes Birkin bag occupied the leather chair beside her like an honored guest. She didn't bother to look up from her phone as Janice entered. At the head of the table sat Arthur Davis. He was a distinguished-looking man in his late 60s, with silver hair and a warm, grandfatherly smile that Janice now knew was the mask of a $20,000 snake. Janice, Maya, please come in, sit down, Arthur said, his voice dripping with practiced mournful sympathy. "I know this is an incredibly difficult day, but you are making the right choice. Family must protect family." Janice slowly lowered herself into a chair at the opposite end of the table. Maya sat rigidly beside her. Marcus leaned forward, folding his hands. "Mama, I promise you, I'm going to fix the business. And the facility Chloe found for you, it's really not that bad. It's safe. You won't have to worry about bills or the cold ever again." Chloe finally looked up, offering a tight, patronizing smile. "The state covers all the meals, Janice. It's very practical. I've already arranged for the medical transport to pick you up on Monday, after the sheriff clears the house." Janice looked at her daughter-in-law. She looked at the diamond tennis bracelet sparkling on Chloe's wrist, bought with the pension money Janice had worked 35 years to earn. "You've been very thorough, Chloe," Janice whispered, her voice weak and trembling. "We just want what's best," Chloe replied smoothly, checking her Rolex. "Arthur, can we get this signed? I have a massage appointment at noon." Arthur nodded, sliding a thick stack of legal documents across the long glass table. "Of course. Janice, this is a standard quitclaim deed. By signing this, you are transferring all rights, titles, and interests in the property to Marcus's LLC. This allows him to legally negotiate the default with Apex Capital without your involvement. Just sign at the yellow tabs." Arthur offered her a heavy, gold-plated Montblanc pen. Janice stared at the pen. She slowly reached out, her hand shaking violently, and took it. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a smug, satisfied tension leaving his body. He had done it. He had stolen $250,000, forged a deed, nearly made his mother homeless. And now, he was getting away with it completely clean. Janice hovered the gold pen over the first yellow tab. The room was dead silent, save for the ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the corner. Tick-tock, tick. Janice stopped. Her hand ceased shaking. Slowly, deliberately, Janice placed the gold pen down on the glass table. The soft clink sounded unnaturally loud. Janice lifted her head. She rolled her shoulders back, her spine straightening against the leather chair. The frail, hunched posture evaporated instantly. When she locked eyes with Arthur Davis, the terrified old woman was entirely gone. In her place sat a formidable, furious matriarch. "I don't think I'll be signing this today, Arthur," Janice said. Her voice was no longer a whisper. It was cold, sharp, and rang with absolute authority. Marcus frowned, a flicker of panic crossing his face. "Mama, what are you doing? We agreed on the phone." "I lied to you, Marcus," Janice cut him off, her tone so icy it made him physically flinch. "Something I learned from you." Chloe scoffed, crossing her arms. "Janice, stop being dramatic. If you don't sign this, the sheriff throws you on the street in 4 days. You have no money, no power, and no options. Sign the paper." "Actually, Mrs. Thompson has a great deal of power," a new, booming voice announced from the doorway. Everyone whipped their heads around. Standing in the doorway was Evelyn Vance, wearing a striking crimson suit, carrying a thick leather briefcase. Beside her stood a tall, broad-shouldered man in a windbreaker with a golden badge clipped to his belt. Arthur Davis stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "Evelyn, what is the meaning of this? This is a private mediation." Evelyn walked into the room like a predator entering a cage full of terrified mice. She didn't ask for a seat. She walked straight to the center of the table and dropped her briefcase with a heavy thud. "Sit down, Arthur," Evelyn commanded, not looking at him. She gestured to the man beside her. "This is Investigator Miller with the Pennsylvania Department of Aging and Adult Protective Services, Financial Crimes Division." All the color drained from Marcus's face. He looked like he was going to vomit. Chloe dropped her phone, the screen cracking against the glass table. "I am acting as Mrs. Thompson's primary legal counsel," Evelyn continued, unlatching her briefcase. "And we are not here to sign a quitclaim deed. We are here to present you with a choice regarding your impending federal indictments." "Indictments?" Arthur sputtered, his professional facade crumbling into sheer panic. "Evelyn, you are out of line. Marcus has a valid power of attorney. A power of attorney does not cover the forgery of a real estate deed to secure a $300,000 subprime loan, Arthur," Evelyn snapped, pulling out the printed copy of the Apex Capital deed and slamming it onto the table. Evelyn pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the blue notary stamp at the bottom of the page. "And a notary license certainly does not give you the right to stamp a forged document in exchange for a $20,000 wire transfer hidden as a consulting fee to your Shell LLC 3 days after the loan dispersed. Arthur Davis stopped breathing. He stared at the deed, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. He looked at Evelyn, then at the APS investigator, and finally at Janice. He knew instantly, with the chilling certainty of a seasoned lawyer, that his career was dead. "You have 2 choices, Arthur," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with venom. "Option A. Investigator Miller arrests you right now for conspiracy, elder financial abuse, and first-degree felony forgery. You will be disbarred by Monday and spend your retirement in a federal penitentiary." Arthur gripped the edge of the table, his knees buckling slightly. "And option B?" he rasped. "Option B," Evelyn said, sliding a different document toward him. "You sign this surrender of your law license immediately. You agree to cooperate fully as a witness against Marcus and Chloe, and you wire the $20,000 you stole directly back to Mrs. Thompson's account within the hour. Choose." Arthur didn't even hesitate. With shaking hands, he grabbed his own Mont Blanc pen and signed the surrender. He didn't look at Marcus. He had chosen self-preservation. Evelyn smiled a shark's smile. She turned her gaze to Marcus and Chloe. Marcus was hyperventilating. He was clutching his chest, his eyes darting frantically around the room. Chloe was pressed back into her chair, her face a mask of pale horror. "Now for the devoted children," Evelyn said softly. She pulled out the bank statements, the credit card logs, and finally, the printed email about Shady Pines Medicaid facility. She spread them out on the glass table like tarot cards predicting a gruesome death. $240,000 drained from a pension, Evelyn recited. $300,000 fraudulently borrowed against a paid-off home. Over $500,000 stolen from a widow to fund Botox, luxury car leases, and Aspen vacations, culminating in a plot to institutionalize her to hide the theft. Investigator Miller stepped forward, his hand resting on his utility belt. Under Pennsylvania law, financial exploitation of a care-dependent person exceeding $100,000 is a first-degree felony. It carries a mandatory minimum sentence. You are looking at 15 to 20 years, Mr. Thompson. 15 years. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He let out a pathetic, high-pitched whimper and fell out of his chair, landing on his knees on the carpet. "No, no, please," Marcus sobbed, crawling toward Janice. "Mama, I'm sorry. I'll pay you back. I'll work 3 jobs. You can't let them put me in prison. I won't survive it, Mama, please." Janice looked down at her son. For 34 years, she had picked him up when he fell. She had bandaged his knees, paid his tuition, and starved in the dark so he could pretend to be a king. "Get off my floor, Marcus," Janice said, her voice devoid of any pity. "You stopped being my son the day you planned to throw me in a state ward to rot." "It wasn't me," a shrill, hysterical voice echoed through the room. Everyone turned to look at Chloe. Chloe had jumped to her feet. She was pointing a shaking finger directly at her husband. The mask of the sophisticated, wealthy socialite had completely dissolved, revealing a cornered, desperate rat. "I didn't know about the forgery," Chloe screamed, stepping away from Marcus as if he were diseased. "I thought it was a legitimate business loan. He lied to me, too. He manages all the finances. I am just a housewife. You can't arrest me. I'm a victim." Marcus stopped crying. He stayed on his knees, slowly turning his head to look up at his wife. "Chloe?" Marcus whispered, his voice cracking with disbelief. "What are you doing? We did this together." "I didn't do anything," Chloe yelled, looking desperately at the APS investigator. "He forged the deed. He paid the bribe. Arrest him. I want a divorce." The sheer, breathtaking betrayal hung in the air. This was the ultimate tragedy of thieves. When the ship sinks, they will gladly drown each other to stay afloat. Marcus stared at the woman he had destroyed his mother for, the woman he had bought Hermes bags and a Tesla for, trading his own soul to keep her happy. And the moment she faced consequences, she was offering his head on a silver platter. Something inside Marcus finally snapped. The terror in his eyes vanished, replaced by a dark, ugly rage. He stood up slowly, wiping his nose with the back of his sleeve. He reached into his suit jacket. For a terrifying second, Maya thought he was reaching for a weapon. She stepped in front of Janice. But Marcus didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out his iPhone. "You want to play the victim, Chloe?" Marcus hissed, his voice trembling with venom. He unlocked the phone and violently threw it onto the glass table. It slid across the smooth surface, stopping right in front of Evelyn Vance. "Read the text messages from October 12th. Marcus barked at Evelyn, never taking his eyes off his wife. Evelyn picked up the phone. She tapped the screen, scrolling for a moment. A cold, delighted smile spread across her face. "Oh my," Evelyn murmured. She cleared her throat and began to read aloud for the entire room to hear. "From Chloe, I don't care if the bank said no. We need the money for the Aspen trip and my new lease. Take the house." Evelyn scrolled down. "From Marcus, I can't mortgage her house without her signature. It's illegal, Chloe. I could go to jail." "From Chloe, then forge it, you coward. Arthur Davis said he would stamp it for $20,000. If you don't do this, I am leaving you and taking half the LLC. Be a man and get it done. The old bat won't notice anyway." Chloe let out a strangled gasp, her hands flying to her face. "You set me up," Marcus snarled, taking a step toward her. "You pushed me into this. You spent every dime." "You're a pathetic excuse for a husband," Chloe shrieked back, tears of fury ruining her expensive makeup. "You couldn't provide for me. You promised me a lifestyle you couldn't afford." "I stole from my mother for you," Marcus roared. "Enough!" Janice's voice cut through the room like a whip, silencing the violent lovers' quarrel instantly. Janice stood up. She walked around the table, stopping directly in front of the two of them. They both shrank back under her gaze. "You both make me sick," Janice said quietly, her words dripping with absolute disgust. "You are greedy, hollow, vicious little parasites. But I am not going to let you drag me through years of criminal court hearings while my house sits in foreclosure." Janice turned to Evelyn. "Give them the terms." Evelyn Vance stepped forward, laying a new stack of papers on the table. "Here is the deal," Evelyn said, all business now. "You sign a confession of judgment, admitting to the $300,000 fraud. This legally binds both of you to the debt, completely absolving Mrs. Thompson of the Apex Capital loan. Marcus, you will sign over the remaining liquidated assets of the LLC to pay the arrears and stop the foreclosure." "There are no assets," Marcus cried. "Yes, there are," Evelyn said, turning her chilling gaze to Chloe. "Chloe, you will sign a voluntary asset forfeiture agreement. You are signing over the title to the Tesla, the lease to the luxury apartment, and you will surrender every designer handbag, piece of jewelry, and luxury item purchased in the last 2 years. We will auction them to pay the mortgage." Chloe looked like she had been shot. "My bags? My car? No! You can't take those, they're mine." Investigator Miller took a pair of steel handcuffs off his belt and let them clink loudly against the table. "Sign the forfeiture, ma'am, or put your hands behind your back. Your choice." Chloe looked at the handcuffs. She looked at the door. She looked at Marcus, who was glaring at her with pure hatred. Trembling, sobbing hysterically, Chloe reached for the gold pen. It took 2 hours to sign everything. By the time they were finished, Marcus and Chloe were financially annihilated. They had no cars, no apartment, no business, and no marriage. They walked out of Arthur Davis's office separately, stepping into the freezing Philadelphia wind with absolutely nothing left to their names except a massive mountain of debt they would spend the rest of their lives paying off. Arthur Davis sat alone in his office, staring blankly at the wall, a disgraced, ruined man. Janice and Maya stood in the lobby of the high-rise. Evelyn Vance handed Janice a certified folder containing the legal documents that cleared the title of her home. "You played a masterpiece today, Mrs. Thompson," Evelyn said, shaking Janice's hand with genuine respect. "The foreclosure is halted, the house is yours, and the debt belongs to them." "Thank you, Evelyn," Janice said, a genuine warm smile touching her lips for the first time in months. When Janice and Maya walked out of the building, the midday sun had broken through the winter clouds. The ice on the sidewalks was beginning to melt, sparkling in the light. "Mom?" Maya asked softly as they walked to the car. "How do you feel?" Janice stopped. She took a deep breath of the cold, crisp air. She thought about the empty refrigerator. She thought about the dark living room. And then she thought about the look on Chloe's face when she realized she was losing everything. Janice reached into her pocket. She pulled out the gold hoop earrings Maya had left on the kitchen table a week ago. Carefully, Janice helped Maya put them back on. "I feel," Janice said, her voice steady, strong, and deeply satisfied, "like we need to go to the grocery store. I want to buy a steak for dinner. And then we are going home to turn the heat all the way up." As they drove away, leaving the wreckage of Marcus and Chloe's greed behind them, Janice knew one thing for certain. The darkness was finally gone, and the light was entirely hers to control.